This is
We
not.
never stand alone, cause unity's our resolution. Umoja is the message, a call for.
In the African community, before any great undertaking, there's always a ritual that we perform, and that ritual is the ritual of libation. This libation is a libation opportunity for us to join together as a united community, as one, to unite those that have gone on before us, those who are our recent ancestors that have departed, as well as our unborn children who will come in their own time. And I would ask that you allow me to assume this posture of deference and reverence to the absolute and to our ancestors. And we do that by calling out to the absolute. We call out to you, you who is known by many different names. We've assembled here tonight to bear witness that you are the infinite, all-wise, all-knowing one. We call out to you. We call out to you in those most ancient names of the absolute. So we call out in the names of Ptah, Amun, Ra. We call out to you. We call out to you in those names that have come down through the annals of time, through the many generations of African people. And so we utter the names of Obatala, Yemaya, Oshun. We call out in the names of Kwame Yankopon, the most ancient ancestor. We ask that you, Obade, Triadupon, Odukoma, the creative force, bear witness your children have assembled here on this night. Jiyame, the God force of the universe. And even down through the times of us traveling from our motherland into other lands, we utter the names of, yes, you, Jehovah, Yahweh, the Christ, Allah, Ra, Jah. We call you. Come, bear witness that your children have assembled here on this night, and that our words be like arrows dipped in honey, that when they find their way to our hearts, that they are soothing and they bring great joy and pleasure and not hurt and pain. We ask that you come and allow us to walk upright and be a manifestation of you here on this earthly plane. And so, we pour the drink, and we ask that you ancestors, whose names we do not know, but we know you existed because each and every one of us is a manifestation of some great African that existed over 40,000 generations ago. We call out to you, you great ancestors, you who outstretched arms lay beneath the Atlantic Ocean, beckoning us to reclaim our bird of passage in the spirit of Sankofa, 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 to return back and fetch what we've forgotten so that we can again return to our glorious ways as African people. Come, great ancestors, have your drink as we all say in pour libation. We call out to you Africans whose names we do know. We know who you are because down through the annals of time you have left your mark. You've left the mark of what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man. So you've given us our peoplehood. And so we call out to you, you great ancestors. Yes, you in Zinga, come, be with us here on this night. Ya Asantawa, you great queen mother. Come, Pianke, come, Tutmosis, come have your drink with us tonight. We beckon you from down through the annals of time because we know you hover among us right now to give us guidance, to give us understanding, to give us infinite wisdom. Come have your drink on this night as we all say in pour libation. We call forth those ancestors who continued the fight, to continue the forward struggle for African liberation here in the diaspora. So yes, we honor you on this night. Boukman and Cecilia Fatima, come be with us here tonight, Zuni. Have your drink. Come, Queen Mother, yes, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Prosser, Nat Turner. Come, be with us here on this night. Yes, the real dream team, El Hajj Malik Shabazz, and yes, you, Martin Luther King. Come be with us here on this night as we all say and pour libation. And now we call forth those names of our cultural heroes and sheroes. You know, the ones who have given us the prescriptions, who've given us the playbook, have given us the roadmap for African liberation. And so we honor you on this night. Come, Bobby E. Wright, be with us here tonight. Baba J. Carruthers, come, be with us. Barbara Sizemore, come, yes. Margaret Burroughs, come, have your drink with us tonight. Come, you great ancestors, as we say in pour libation. This is a time for us to meditate and call out our own lines and lineages, our mothers, our fathers, our great-great-great-grandparents. Utter their names through the meditations of your heart, but never be afraid to call out their names, because it's only when you stop calling their names that they cease to exist. Your ancestors, they live. They live in you. They speak to you. They speak through you. So take a moment to just honor them and call forth the names. I call forth the names of my mother and my father, Janie and Willie Lee Harris. I call forth the names of my grandparents, Charles and Cleo Howe. I call forth the names of my father's parents, Lucille and Thomas Harris. Follow that prescription and your ancestors will always come to you and speak to you and through you because they live in you. Come, great ancestors, have your drink, as we all say in pour libation. And now, we call forth the unborn child, because the unborn child is the absolute's way saying that life will and life must go on. For in the African proverb it says, children are the rewards of life. And then when the unborn children come in their own time, they will hold all of us, those of you viewing this, those of you who are participating in this moment, accountable. That we as an African people dared to struggle, dared to have the audacity to believe that they could live a freer and fuller life than we ever could have imagined. Come, unborn children, come in your own time. Beckon your parents to dance. Beckon your fathers to work and build. Beckon African people to march forward into their destiny of liberation, freedom, and humanity. Come have your drink, as we all say in pour libation. And it is done. And if we truly, truly believe in our hearts that we are an African people, then let it be as our brothers and sisters in Mali, the Dogon people would say, the Nomo, which means sacred speech. If you speak it, it manifests itself on whatever plane. And so it passed through the Middle Passage and it survived in the wit and wisdom of our elders. When Mudir and Pawpaw would say, if you don't have nothing nice to say, don't say nothing. Because the power of life and death is in the tongue. We can speak life into our communities again. We can speak love into our communities again. We can speak compassion into our communities again. When and if we practice Sankofa, which is us going back and reclaiming what is ours. Medase, Asante Sana, thank you very much. It is done.
Asante Sana, Kwesi Ronald Harris, for the beautiful libation. The protocol for our program is Ancestors First. Hotep, I'm Dr. Gloria Lattimore Peace, host and producer of OmniU Presents the H3O Art of Life show. The title of this show is Honoring and Preserving Black Cultural Institutions. And I have with me the guests who are best suited to discuss this topic. I have with me Dr. Conrad W. Worrill, who is director and professor at the Jacob H. Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies. I have with me Joan Gray, who is the president of Moon 2 Dance Theater, and I have Kemati. Did I say it right? As
Kemati.
Kemati. I want to always say it right. Kemati Porter, who is the interim executive director of ETA Creative Arts Foundation. Yes, and we are here to talk about maintaining, preserving, honoring, remembering Black cultural institutions. And I want to just open up by saying that I have a larger view probably than many people about this whole notion of what constitutes an institution. In our African homeland, the institutions were in the people. The people were the institutions. The brick and mortar were simply the thing that embodied what the people brought. So that I think of institutions, first of all, as beginnings, their source being in us. And so when I think of institutions, I think of Dr. Margaret Taylor Goss Burroughs, for example, who even Richard Daley said was an institution. So that I take the view that institutions start with people. And if we are going to preserve and honor Black cultural institutions, then we need to preserve and honor those who envision them, who generate them, who shepherd them, and from whom they come. The second thing I just want to put into our conversation is I view culture in a very broad way. I don't see culture as limited to the arts, to music, dance, those things, fine arts. I see culture as a way of life. For me, it is the way of life. I don't see culture as having I don't view many cultures. I view a single culture because if it doesn't contribute to life, then it is something other than a culture, and I don't think they created a word for those things that simply sustain and perpetuate death. So I'm looking at culture not just as the institutions in which we go for inner attainment, but I would put into there those things that they call educational institutions, because if we're talking about something that is Black, then if it doesn't include Black culture, then it is something other than that. It is some word that they haven't invented yet. So that's my take on it. And from that standpoint, then we may talk about buildings, but we need to also talk about people. And so with the protocol of Ancestors First, I'm going to let Dr. Conrad Worrill begin to talk about the most recent honor and preservation of a Black cultural institution, Dr. Margaret Taylor Goss Burroughs.
Well, in Chicago on yesterday, August 12th, the Chicago Park District voted unanimously to name the 31st Street Beach and Park in honor of Margaret Burroughs. It came out of a campaign that was initiated by Congressman Bobby Rush in 2014 that kind of got stalled for a moment, and he reached out to some of us in the community and put together earlier this year a committee in which Peggy Montez, who's head of the Children's Museum, and I were co-chair. And we initiated quite a social media campaign soliciting people to sign petitions in support of this effort. And so on yesterday, the Park District, because of this campaign of thousands of people here in Chicago and in fact around the country who signed the petitions and letters we solicited from numerous elected officials and business persons and community activists and others who knew Margaret Burroughs, the Park District Board of Commissioners decided on yesterday to name the 31st Street Beach and Park 30 acres in honor of Margaret Burroughs. So it's a great day, and so it's the beat on that is not stopping, because we are talking with your daughter, Deborah Hand, who is a renowned sculpturist who did the piece on Paul Lawrence Dunbar that sits beautifully in Dunbar Park. We've been talking with her about the possibility, and she has agreed if we can put together the resources to commission her to build a life-size statue in the interest of 31st Street Beach in honor of Margaret Worrill. So that's the next project.
Well, I'm overwhelmed and overjoyed because I loved Dr. Margaret Taylor Goss Burroughs. I met her at DuSable High School, and she was my art teacher, and I always say that I didn't become an artist like my classmate Ramon Price, but still she tolerated me, and I maintained a relationship with her when she opened the museum in her own home and throughout the time. So it was a great pleasure to me when my daughter was a fledgling artist, and she took her under her wing and gave her her first public show and encouraged her to develop, and has been her guardian angel. And so when she made her transition, my daughter grieved as though she had lost her mother, and I realized that. So I comforted her as though her mother had passed away, even though I am her biological mother. I do recognize the bond that was between them. So I know that she will be honored. I don't know how she will get through it, because she'll probably cry the whole time just thinking.
Well, when I talked to her about it, Dr. Lattimore, she was just, I could feel, she said, I'm crying now. It's just the thought of creating a sculptural piece in honor. But, we're talking about black culture, and my friends here are in your opening, you talked about institutions being in the people. And so Joan Gray and Kemati represent people who were institutions of themselves, with Lyle Talbert and Muntu and Abner Joan Brown with the ETA Theater. But maybe as a way to get into the conversation, in the 1960s we did a switch. We sort of killed the way people were describing who we were at that moment in history as a Negro people. Because I always say that a lot of people are not aware, but there was a big fight among black people coming out of the 19th century into the 20th century, whether we should call ourselves Negroes or colored people or whatever. And in the New York Times in 1923, because of a campaign led by the NAACP, they declared that we were Negro people for once and forevermore. And so, I should have brought the New York Times, but the 1960s was a very important period in terms of black cultural institutions in Chicago, because, and around the country, because we made a shift. And the shift was to begin to identify ourselves differently, a way of taking the idea of black, because up to that point, black was the most negative thing. If I had called Sister Joan black in 64, she would have slapped me. But by 66, 67, 68, there was a switch. And then we began to not only begin to see ourselves as black as the black power explosion unfolded in this country, we began to re-identify with Africa. And so out of that context, Muntu, out of that context, the ETA Theaters, and other black cultural initiatives that occurred here in the city of Chicago.
I think it might be appropriate now, before I go to Kemati, to paraphrase something that I found in a book of poetry by Hakeem Madhubuti that we knew earlier than that time as Don L. Lee. And the title of his book is called Don't Cry, Scream. In it, I'm paraphrasing now, he's actually talking about poetry, but I'm talking about black cultural institutions. The fact that an institution is black means that in the life of the institution, the history and the histories of the institution's ancestors, those histories have been different from the histories of Chinese and Japanese and Eskimos and Indians and Irish people. The juice from tomatoes is not called merely juice. It is called tomato juice. If you go into a restaurant desiring tomato juice, you do not order the waiter to bring you juice. You request distinctly tomato juice. The juice from cranberries is called cranberry juice. The juice from oranges is called orange juice. The institutions that are black institutions should have black juice.
All right.
That's me paraphrasing. Talk to us about our ancestor, Abena Joan Brown, and talk to us about the institution, the Blackberry Juice Institution.
Absolutely. For viewers who don't know, Abena Joan Brown passed away 2.5 weeks ago, approximately, I think. So for 40 years, she helmed ETA, Creative Arts Foundation. I first met her as a young, aspiring something in the arts, is what I'll call it, when I went to the Harris Y to become a part of ETA Creative Arts Foundation. And she was not the first person that I met, but eventually over time, I came to know that she was the one. It was about the one. When you spoke about the institution being in the people, I think that is Abena. That is Abena. She had such a vision and a force behind that vision that she wanted to create a space and a place for African American artists to work, to develop, to become the best that they could be, to hone their craft. And I think that was part of the excitement of being at ETA at a very young age for me. And I was dragging our daughter behind me, making sure she was taking classes and doing all these things too. But it was such an inspiring and such a supportive environment where you felt like it's okay to fail here because it doesn't cost you your career. But more importantly, you learned about all the giants who walked before you. You learned the possibility that you could dream really big. You could really be the best there is to be. And she would make sure that you had the space. She was working on the space where we could do that. In her passing, I think we're all starting to really deeply understand what she left here for us in terms of finishing or broadening her vision and her dream of what an arts institution, a cultural arts institution can be for a community. We look outside of ourselves to make things successful. She was always telling us, it is us. We do the work. It is our work. It's no one else's work to do. We can have whatever we want if we are willing to work for it. And part of moving forward with ETA for myself, the staff, the board, is really coming into a really clear understanding that we can do this. We can keep this institution in the community with the help of the community. And as long as they want it, we'll be there and it will be open. And it's not just about the building. The building is a facade. Mm-hmm. What's important is what happens inside that building. Mm-hmm. That we can bring our children in, we can teach them, we can train them, they can grow, they become confident, they go off to the finest colleges, they come back. They're contributors to society, particularly to our communities. The institutions keep growing.
I think that we need to say some things about Abena Joan Brown because she was
a force.
Something else. Force is really a...
She was an institution.
She was.
That's it. She's an institution.
Exactly. And I can remember so many things that she did, and I can remember so many things that she said. In fact, in 1994, I interviewed her sitting right where you're sitting. It's amazing that you took that seat because she was sitting in that chair in this studio in 1994 being interviewed. She, with Yusini sitting where you're sitting,
Wow.
and a person whose name I don't recall at the moment, oh no, Chocolate Chips was sitting there. Nora Brooks Blakely was sitting there, and then Yusini was sitting over there. And then there was another person who was one of the actresses that was in a current production. And so that will be airing on the 14th of August, and again,
Tomorrow.
I think again on the 28th. But the important thing is she gets to speak for herself. And you get to see this woman's vision never, her drive, her force never waned throughout the entire time, because when I went to the memorial service and they had this videotape of her speaking here prior to her transition, she was saying the same things.
Yes.
For 21 years that I knew about, she was saying exactly what she said sitting on this stage in that chair in that interview. So she was consistent. She was unfaltering. And you have to have that kind of drive. You have to have that kind of confidence. And she did not lack confidence in the face of anything or anybody. And you have to concern yourself with how not only do you start this, but how do you keep it going?
How do you grow?
I know she had Harold Okoro Johnson. They were together at the beginning of this. And I know that, many other people contributed to what she liked to call etat. And I like to hear her say that.
Yeah, etat.
But the thing is that she was almost like a one-man band. I know that there were others. I'm fully aware that Runako was there, and I know there were people in the office, and there were all kinds of people. But the thing was, you knew that she had to be the one who was up in the middle of the night on those long phone calls, getting people to do things and making things happen, and probably sometimes, forcing people to do stuff that they were reluctant to do because they needed to do it. Like you said, she said, it's our work.
It's our work.
And she didn't let you forget that it was our work.
I'd like to say something about Abena, because it was Abena who, I went to Abena after Lyle Talbot passed, who was our founding
I remember
artistic.
Lyle. I worked with him.
And I went to Abena and said, I need you to help me find us an executive director for Muntu. And I won't say the word she said, but she said, you do it. I was like, I don't know nothing about that. I don't know anything about that. She said, oh, but you will. You do it. And I said, the only way I'll do it is if you help me. And she said, I will help you. And she became vice chair of Muntu's board. And you talk about those late night phone calls. I can't tell you how many times I would wake up with the phone in my in my ear, and I can still hear Abena saying, you there? You there? Listening. But I learned so much from her because she was the type of a person who mentored. And all of the conversations that we had about institution building and about making sure that the institutions were there to serve the people. And I think that's one of the primary differences between how our cultural institutions are formalized and how other institutions are. It's not a bad thing, it's just a different thing. When Muntu was formed in the same way with ETA, it was about service to our people, service to our communities, because we realized that one of the biggest drawbacks to us as a people was that we did not know who we were. We didn't know how strong we were. We did not know from whence we came. We had internalized all of the negativisms that were used to describe us. Minorities, underprivileged, underserved, all of these negative terms beat us down as a people. I watched it happen. I watched it happen when the heyday of the 60s came, when everybody was fired up about, claiming their blackness.
I'm black and I'm proud.
And there it is. And then as as that generation, first generation of many, many, many young black people who went to college for the first time, it was the biggest surge of black people going into college. And I remember being on tour with Muntu, and we got into, it was late at night, and we got into this conversation about, now that we are the ones who are doing this work, how do we prepare that next generation so that, yes, they aspire, and yes, they go to college, but that they hold on to their identity and to the proudness of their African heritage. And I loved what you said about culture not just being about the arts. Culture is everything that we are. It's all of our mannerisms, it's how we speak, how we dress, how we eat. And there's multiple expressions of that, and that's what Abena taught me. And she stayed on my case, like as my grandmother used to say, white on rice. She did not let up, because she said, you have got to do what is necessary for Muntu to survive. And the way you do that is you serve your people. You give them something that's meaningful. And around the time when I stopped dancing, I was sitting in the audience watching the concert. And I went out into the lobby at the end of the show, and I was just, talking to people and finding out, how'd you like the show? And so I asked one lady, I don't even know who she was, I said, how'd you like the show? She said, I loved it. I said, what did you love about it? She said, I felt so good about myself. And that was, as Abena would call it, the character revealing scene. And that gave me a greater clarity that the dance, the music, the theater, the art making was the conduit. It was not the end-all, be-all. It was the conduit through which we were charged with strengthening our people, building them up, having them understand you don't have to take a backseat to nobody. You don't have to accept any of the labels that have been put on us as a people. I don't care what you call yourself.
Right.
You can call yourself black, Negro, colored, whatever you choose to call yourself. It's not important. What's important, well, it's important, but ultimately what's important is how you view yourself and what you think about yourself and how you pass that on to that next generation. And sadly, our the generation that came after us, many of those traditions got lost because a lot of our people who were upscale moved out of the community, moved up. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we forgot, some of us, to tell our children about who we were. And that, to me, is the root cause. One of the visions that Arvin and I used to talk about, and sometimes Nancy McKeever and my board chair, was that her vision was that we would have a mega arts complex on the south side of Chicago, and it would house or support all of the black cultural institutions and learning institutions on the south side. And she said, and when I'm gone, you gonna lead it. I was like, what you talking about, Willis? But the vision was, and lately there's been a group of us who are seeing our institutions surviving, but surviving through stress. And we've been having conversations about how do we strengthen all of our institutions? How do we collaborate? How do we come together? We maintain our identities and our visions and our purpose, but how do we become a mega force? Maybe it's not physically in the same place, but we need to be united. We all need to be focused on how we improve our communities, how we strengthen our children. We do a lot of programs. We're in about 10, 15 schools around the city. And it takes us 3-4 weeks just to get them to understand what Africa is. You know, what that is and what that means to them. And one of the first things I heard from kids when I was teaching is, I ain't no African. You know, how do you say that? You know, Part of it is that because it's not taught in our schools. So our cultural institutions are very important and valuable to the community because we are one of the purveyors, not the only, but we are one of the purveyors of our heritage, our characteristics, and those things that made us who we are. So that's what I learned from Abana.
I'm coming, Conrad, but hold up. I have to stop by Joan for a second and tell her that, I do think it matters what we call ourselves. And I do think that if we don't recognize ourselves as blackberries, that we're going to start expressing Five Alive.
Gotcha.
Which is some artificial thing, a blend, some multicultural, if there can be, some artificial processed product, which is what appears to be happening now. We seem to be, when you squeeze us, you seem to get Five Alive. You seem not to get real juice from real fruit. And it is exactly what you said, which is it's important that we and our children know who they are. And they can't call themselves anything and know who they are. But it is the task of institutions, ancestors, elders, your group, your age grade, to keep that before them. Because at some point it will be internalized. But we have to recognize that we have a formidable adversary. 24/7, there is something going on to alter the blackberry juice. So we have to recognize that we can't simply do a little, program here and a little program there. Certainly we must do them, but we must recognize the 24/7 impetus that has to come from this. We used to have an omni institution called the church. And the church serviced our people and counseled our people and kept them knowing who they were as a community. But something went somewhere with that. And I don't want to make a criticism or an evaluation. I just want to say that I just got an email from somebody who talked about a 90-year-old woman being kicked out of a church because she didn't tithe and support the church to the extent that some churches have become
businesses.
Businesses, exactly. Some churches have become middlemen for
Politicians.
For profit-driven institutions that exist outside of our community. Some churches cannot afford to talk that black stuff and practice that African stuff. And whenever you find one, it is such a pleasure to hear somebody like a Jeremiah Wright stand in the pulpit with his kente cloth on and hold forth and tell us what we already knew, what we were already saying. But then he took the heat for saying what we were saying among ourselves. So we have to be steadfast in making certain that we do all we can by, first of all, being examples. How do black people be black? What do they do that's different? What do they do that's black? We respect our elders. We honor our ancestors. Those things we do. We can't call ourselves black if we don't do those two things. And then there are other things that we do. It's not about the hairstyle and the dress and so much as it is about your character, the content of your character, and how you behave yourself. So, in line with the institutions whose main focus is art, there are also institutions whose main focus is education, and that's where I'm coming to Conrad to talk about the Jacob H. Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies, an historically African institution, even though it is housed in a facility that is not owned by black people. I want you can start anywhere you want to.
Right, that's a long discussion, but you know, the Jacob Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies is part of Northeastern Illinois University, which is a state institution. The building itself historically was the Abraham Lincoln Center that was built in 1905, where Polish people lived in that neighborhood, and through the migration and, of course, the incident after 1919 riots, and white people, the Polish people, began moving out of what they call Bronzeville today, which we call the low end. Black people began to populate that neighborhood and come to the Abraham Lincoln Center. But as a matter of fact, the Abraham Lincoln Center, as a social service agency that was started by white people in 1905 as part of what was called the Settlement House movement, that dovetailed what Jane Addams was doing in another part of the city. AACM at the Abraham Lincoln Center, before the Center for Inner City Studies came into existence, practiced in the Abraham Lincoln Center. In the 1930s, the Negro Writers Club met Richard Wright and Gwendolyn Brooks and Margaret Burroughs and Langston Hughes met at the Abraham Lincoln Center in what many writers call the Chicago Renaissance, that had quite a literary impact in the world. And I'm saying all that to get to a point. The Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies of Northeastern Illinois University on September 8th will be its 49th year. And in that space, we've had some professors, as you know, colleagues of yours, certainly Dr. Jacob Carruthers and Dr. Anderson Thompson. And then we had Nancy Arnaz, who walked through, and Barbara Sizemore, and Sonia Stone, and Elkin Satoli, and these great teachers, including yourself, Dr. Lattimore. And so we're in a transitional period now. But inside the physical space of what became renamed the Carruthers Center in 2004, we had other institutional operations like the Communiversity, which was an independent educational African-centered approach to independent learning. And inside that space, Dr. Carruthers founded in 1978 the Kemati Institute. So whatever happens to the Carruthers Center as it approaches perhaps its 50th year, a year from now, we have created an educational paradigm, an African-centered approach, an African-centered understanding of education. And so I'm just kind of vibing off of my sister here, Joan and Kemati, because I'm thinking about the time I walked in the Afro Arts Theater, and I was just taken over by the ethnic heritage ensemble that became the Pharaohs. And Eugenie Perkins wrote an article in 1968 that I have right here that talks about the black cultural explosion. This article was in the Chicago Daily News in 1968, where he highlighted and depicted the black cultural explosion that was taking place in the city of Chicago. And he characterized this tall sister who was dancing across the stage like an African queen, and without calling her name. Well, I know that was Darlene Blackburn. And so this tradition, this energy, what Joan was commenting on is perhaps our struggle for this intergenerational understanding of who we are and the continuum of who we are in our work. And so this is a mighty challenge, but you have two individuals here who are part of the intergenerational continuum, because Joan, mentored by Abena, Kemati, and mentored by Abena, and I must say she kind of mentored me a little bit in another kind of way, because I'm not an artist, but she definitely mentored me, and it's probably the reason why I'm sitting here today having what I hope is a serious conversation about the our past, our present, and most importantly, the future when it comes to maintaining our black cultural institutions. And one of the things that Abena was insistent on and was a major advocate of and demonstrated consistently throughout her work is finding the resources to maintain and support our institutions by challenging our own people to support our institutions in the economic arena. And that remains to be our challenge to keep these ideas alive within our community.
Well, we're confused about what we need, but I have to say two things, because one of them is really making me kind of ashamed, because it seems like I'm going to have a series of these shows rather than just parts 1 and 2, because Kalan, Phil Karan, has gone as far as anybody you know in doing exactly what we're discussing today.
Yes.
So I should have reached out to him, and I will. But I want to also add Don Smith's name to the history of the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies.
Yes.
Now,
it wouldn't have been a Center for Inner City Studies
had it not been
Don
for him.
Smith,
Right.
Because he wrote the proposal. It was a federally funded project that got institutionalized, and sometimes his name does get lost. But during that time, he was the only black professor, or one of few black professors at Northeastern Illinois University around 1964 and 65. But the center has been a hub, for a lot of our organizing work in what we call the Pan-African nationalist African community, if you will, the African-centered community, if you will, that interchanges with ETA and Muntu and Najwa Dance Corps and many of the Kuumba Theater, Obasi, and now that we had a revival of AACM with their 50th anniversary, and it's ironic that AACM that practiced and rehearsed in the old Abraham Lincoln Center now is coming back to have space inside the Carruthers Center 50 years later with Ernest Dawkins and some of the young musicians that are a part of that continuum. So even though it looks so challenging out here with some of what we observe in our community, there's still these ideas and these institutional advocates, and two of them are right here, who are friends of mine, that are keeping this work alive. And I think that that's so important for us to lift up the fact that we're still in the fight, and we're still advocating, and we're still representing the traditions of a Margaret Burroughs, of a Abena Joan Brown, and many of a Jacob Carruthers, and many of our other great ancestors who did work here in the cultural and educational community in Chicago.
You spoke about, and you have done it too, about mentoring, having been mentored. I prefer, having been taught, because some of my friends don't like the word mentor for some reasons that go back to ancient Greece. But anyway, since I didn't do the etymology of mentor, I just stay away from it, because I've been, it's been poo-pooed by some people who are important in my life. But to talk about teaching, Don Smith was my teacher. Jacob Carruthers was my teacher. Carol Adams was a professor at the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies. She was my teacher. I think I learned well. And I think that you are now in the position not only of shepherds, but of teachers. So who will you mentor? Who will you teach? How will you teach? Because that's now a job. I'm a so-called retired educator. But I think education is much broader than a classroom experience. So tell me about your aims in that direction.
A few years ago, at one of our board meetings, we started talking about the need to cultivate and shepherd if you will, that next generation, not just of dancers, but also of the people who would carry forth the administrative and operational things that were needed to keep the organization moving forward. They had to be hand in glove, so to speak. And so the artistic leadership and the organizational leadership met. And I'm coming to the end of my career soon, and Amani is not stepping down as artistic director, but she's focusing more on the conceptual now and the programming now. And all of us, the Atiba and our musical director Clifton, Amani, myself, we began to look at who in the family we thought was had what it would take to succeed moving forward into a leadership position, either on the administrative side or on the artistic side. And we've identified those people.
Good.
And I'll let Amani tell that story if she ever comes on here. But we've identified them, and we've, you know, it's been hard for some of us to step aside and say, okay, give them the opportunity to try it, and to not be too quick to jump in and catch them. You know, they got to fall if that's how it's going. You can't, if they're going to learn how to lead or to guide or to step into that role and then be able to shepherd and mentor and teach when it's their turn to do that, they have to understand what that process is all about. And if we, every time they look like they're faltering, we jump out there to catch them, then they don't learn. I know the different shepherds or mentors that I had, they let me hit my head up against the wall a whole lot of times, because that was a valuable part of understanding how to systematically and strategically figure out what to do. What to do. I didn't graduate from college. I dropped out to get involved in the what people call the movement, and after that went straight into, you know, the arts. But I knew that I made a promise to Alayo on his deathbed that I would do whatever it took, because he said, you got to keep this going. And I fought him with it, just like I fought Abner with it. I don't know nothing about birthing no babies. But I understood, you know, and I said, okay, I'll do it. I will do it. And I did everything that I could to teach myself how to do it. And a lot of ups and downs, a lot of mistakes, but it was an organic process. And so working with, I have two young people in my office. One is a musician with the company, excellent. And when I started talking about retiring, he sent me his resume right away. Like, oh, you pushing me out now, what? But he sent me his resume, and he said, I want to be considered. Whenever you leave, I want to be considered. And Amani has identified Aman Suisan as her assistant, and she is stepping aside and letting him take more authority, letting him be involved in the conceptual conversations about programming and what are the messages that we want to give to our communities. That's so important.
We have 5 minutes, and I want you to have as many of those as you need.
Thank you.
And I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, that's okay.
But they
I get cut
flash
off all the
little
time.
signs on the screen to me.
That's right.
I was just thinking about all of the conversations. I was sitting here just thinking that, you know, I love black people. I just love black people. And that's a phrase that Amina used to say too. She said, because I'm a black people.
Right.
And I'm amazed and assured that we are survivors. And we're going to have what we want. I get tickled sometimes because I always think that I was dodging the bullet, dodging Abner, because I was always busy doing something. She always found me at different points. I was always coming back to ETA. And I think it's kind of, it's funny to me to be in the position as the interim executive director of ETA, Creative Arts Foundation. I think I told the story. She cooked the spaghetti and catfish and coleslaw and cornbread and collard greens that had me over to the house because she was getting ready to really tie me down. I was like, no, no, no. But what I would always say to Abner when she brought this up was, I will do whatever I need to do to make sure that ETA continues. I said, rest assured, Abena, you can count on that. No matter what's going on, I will do whatever I need to do to make sure that ETA continues. And I see that as a challenge to our community, because she always said, we will get whatever we want. We're always able to get whatever we want. So I think I'm challenging our community to step up to the plate, to be underneath every institution sitting here. That what we need is you. We can run it. We'll do those things. We'll make sure that there are people in place to ensure that the vision or the dream moves forward, that the legacies are ensured. But it is the strength of the people that keeps us going. And I know for Abena, that was what it was a lot of time, because she could pick up the phone and she could get the response she needed. She could go another day. So I think when you hear the call from the institution saying, this is what we need you to do, we need you at ETA to subscribe for this new season, our motto is we're going from 45 to 50. We are 45 years old this year. We see ourselves becoming 50. That's a vision. That's the dream. We will get there.
Yeah, you know, I just want to say, I remember I saw Lyle perform, and I said, "Oh my God!" And you know, I'm just having a moment because I saw Joan perform, and then she stopped performing, and maybe this is the reason why I don't come around anymore, because she's not performing. But I saw her get up at Abena's service and perform, and I realized what I've been missing. But they are products of this intergenerational leadership cadre that is so important, and what she just described as a model in month 2. I remember I never knew that Kemati was an actress. And I remember I saw her perform one time, and I said, oh my God, she does that, and now she's translating her actress skills and talents into the administration of the ideas in the art to carry on the tradition of Abena. So we have a proud African community in Chicago.
Can
no
I
matter
have
how
can I
challenged.
have this last minute?
Yeah.
I don't want to minimize what
No,
you
go
just said,
ahead.
but I got to read this from Kemati J's book because I saved it. It says, we are going to do it. Us, black people, beautiful people, the sons and daughters of beautiful people. Bring it back to us. The unimpossibility. Now is the time, the test, while there is something to save other than our lives.
There
That's
it is.
Kemati and Don't Cry, Scream. What's coming up this season?
We're premiering a new production in December called One Root, Many Branches, and focusing on the African cultural root of African peoples wherever they are in the world, focusing particularly in the Caribbean and in Jamaica.
Okay. And what's coming up for you?
We have a season of Chicago and world premieres at ETA. It is a season directed by all-female directors, and we're starting what we call the diaspora journey. For 5 years, we'll be investigating through theater the journey of Africans for the last century.
And what's coming up for, you had some
On September
coming
18th, the renowned scholar Dr. Joyce King is speaking at the Carruthers Center on Education.
Umoja is the message. I'll call for you.